Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. Today we're going to do the culture and we're going to be talking about the vampire's pet. Now, as always with the culture aspect, it's to do with my fictional universe and things mentioned in the stories, so it'll help you understand it more when it's mentioned in certain stories. And as always, we start with a quote that discusses it briefly, and then I'll literally just go straight into the history and the culture. So let's get started. That's my husband, Wolfgang Viper. These are our children, London and Fiano. I'm a werewolf, you see, and Wolfgang is a vampire. It used to be very difficult for our kinds to get married, so we did things called becoming pets, where we gave our blood to keep the vampires from hunting. We get a long, long life out of it. You probably couldn't guess I'm nearing my 50s because of it. So, because I was his pet before we got married, I still wear the traditional collar, but it's a choice these days. It's a quote from The Monster Bully's Crush. So I thought I'd discuss some of the cultural issues with the vampires within my universe and discuss certain aspects of it that appear within my stories. We'll cover the concept of a pet today, then discuss werewolf issues next time, the Strix ones after that, and end with the subjects of vampires and waifs, and then the sparklers, and end with the turned and dampier issues, which will include shadow walkers and krusnoks, so you'll actually know what these are, because they do get mentioned from time to time. It should be informative, and if you're reading my Viper Clan series, you'll certainly learn a bit from it. Now, we'll begin with the subject of pets, and what we'll discuss is simple. 1. What is a pet? 2. When did it start? 3. Who is included as a pet? 4. Benefits of being a pet. And 5. Benefits the pets and the modern veil. So, what is a pet? Well, the term refers to a being kept by a vampire to provide blood so that the vampire does not have to go on regular hunts or use permissions and pheromones to get what they need to survive. The pet system was originally an old system between a vampire master and their slaves. They would take blood from various slaves at a time, and even from local beings living as their land as part of their rent. Just like prima noctis, it was something used, abused, and deemed an inherited right by each vampire lord and heir in a region. However, for lesser members of the family or daughters that needed to keep their virginity, they were required to gain blood and still exhibit the vampire traits of using pheromones and engaging in permission. But it needed to be unlikely that they would have sex in the process. Now, in this time period, the vampires were under the belief that because there was no risk of pregnancy between two female servants and eunuchs, were specifically chosen for their daughters to be their blood givers. These beings were well-trusted servants, often the personal handmaidens or even the butlers of the counts that would then reward them with giving them a tiny drop of their blood to ensure they had the ability to live a little longer. Now, ghouls were made by letting them die from the removal of blood alone and turned from draining them to an inch to death and then giving them their blood. It was a strange thing known that just a little blood without being near to death or wounded would ensure a being would have a year of good health and no aging so these beings could provide long life. So these beings became long life blood givers. Of course, the idea that no sex or pregnancy would ever occur was never really proven, but these beings became the bodyguards and in many cases helped rescue their masters from danger. It was when these beings were not just human but included species like shapeshifters and werewolves that the term pet came into play. During times of total vampire domination to control these other night predators, pets became the collar slaves, their necks marked with a permanent bite and kept not just by lower ranked but even by the counts. With more trouble coming from going to houses for blood, the pet became a political rank and even an advisor rank, similar to the eunuch class within Imperial China. Pets were held in high regard no matter their species, but as time went by and werewolf wars began, any pets that were werewolves were made into sexual slaves as well as blood slaves, not given the title of pet and demeaned and humiliated as the werewolf fighting pits began. They were excluded from ever becoming pets unless in same-sex situations, as the idea of any vampire having sex with a werewolf was considered impossible. As time went by, the institution of the pet developed. Butlers took the positions as rewards for years of service, and it became part of the training to be within a vampire's household. Pets were always marked by a dog collar, whether the priest-style or the literal dog collar. It was often bejeweled, and the pet was used as a form of prowess and money. The healthier and better clothes and manners a pet showed, the better state the house was in, and the more beings were eager to go for it. However, in the 1800s, the situation of Napoleon leaking into the Vale meant that more respect was to be shown for other species, and so the institution fell out of common use, save only as a way for non-vampire or humans to be married into the family of a vampire without being turned. It was almost a civil partnership, with the vampire maintaining good health and care of their pet for the rest of the pet's life. Until full marriage between same-sex couples of all species, as well as marriage between all species, was legalised, the pet system was the only system available for these couples without upsetting family or making a scandal for the household, and indeed their lover, as the institution was still held with high regard. Pets have included all non-vampire species, but as mentioned, the werewolves were not included during the Werewolf Wars. The benefits of being a pet meant, aside from having to give blood, your health was kept at the best, you were kept in comfortable living, and generally worked for the vampire anyway. You had freedom up until the vampire required you. The pets often became celebrities amongst their species, and then in more modern times, activists and able to work between the vampires and other species to help improve situations. Whenever someone needed something, they went to the pet, so the pet held as much power as the next in line to their master. These days, in the more modern Vale, the pet system remains, but only for those that wish for a lifelong commitment to a vampire without having to change their nature. For werewolves and vampires in particular, the pet system after the 1900s permitted them to have relationships, but it became a big symbol to push for the allowance of the species to have equal marriage and actually reproduce with one another, as such parents were usually sterile, but often the uncertainty of what would be born and concerns it could even be a Krusnox had meant that it was not possible. It became the only way to legally be a couple, and the choice to wear a collar has often been done by both couples to arrange a ring or tattoos with them on for the vampire. It's been turned completely from servitude to a vampire to actual equality between the vampire and the werewolf, the term often being used affectionately these days. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you. Bye.